everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Hollie Stuart. Hollie is a dual certified human resource professional, a number one bestseller, award winning author, and keynote speaker. Her memoir, I Can't See for Miles, has won 8 awards. That's impressive. how incredibly well you wrote that book in so many different ways. So the full biography will be at the end of this video. But for now, in your own words, who is Hollie?
Oh, thank you, Valeria. And first of all, it is so wonderful to talk to you. I'm really
Thank
excited
you.
about the conversation we're going to have.
Me too.
In terms of who I am, when I was a child, I couldn't pronounce my name Holly because of those awkward L's. And so I called myself Ho Ho.
Yes.
And I consider Ho Ho who I truly am. That's my true essence. And so Ho Ho is someone who loves people, doesn't matter what they think, what
Mm.
perspectives they have, enjoys a multiplicity of perspectives.
Yeah.
Ho Ho loves to make people laugh. Ho Ho loves to laugh. She loves to learn, constantly learning, constantly improving herself, not because she dislikes who she is, but
Mm.
I think Ho Ho and Holly are now at a place where she really accepts who she is and says, "Okay, I'm a person of value as I am. At the
Yeah.
same time, I can always work on getting better."
Right.
So that's who Holly is. And a lot of times when people get asked who they are, they answer by what they do,
Yeah.
and I really try to get away from that. There's plenty of
Yeah.
things I do, and my identity, which is something that we're going to talk about,
Yeah.
later on in this conversation, that constantly shifts for everyone.
Right.
I mean, in terms of what I do, and like it said in my bio, my
Yeah.
profession is HR manager currently. I'm a runner, I'm a
Yeah.
marathoner, I'm an adventurer, world traveler, author. Those are all things I do and all
Yeah.
things I love to do. And they do play into that essence of who Ho Ho and Holly are. But
Right.
that's not all of who I am.
Yes. I love the way you say that because we often think that we are what we do. That is so
Mhm.
true. And that's why I asked the question to all my guests, out of curiosity, of course, but I'm open to however, you know, wherever we are in the moment anyway, at that time, because we're all very different. But there's something about the doing, like you said, when we do something or things that are inspired by who our essence and what who we are, there's something that's different. Can you talk a little bit more about that, in the sense of purpose? Is that what gives us that sense of purpose, Holly? I almost would say ho ho. I don't want to say Holly anymore. I love that.
You can call me either. Either's fine.
Yes, so cute. Yeah, so talk to me about purpose and this idea of integrating or somehow bringing together the being and the doing. Do you feel like this is everything that you do? There is a sense of purpose to it, of mission, or would you say that's something different? It feels different.
For me, that most often aligns, and it's something that's constantly evolving.
Yeah,
It's not like I have one singular purpose and that's it,
right, right.
or it's not like I can
Mm.
only do this one thing. It's constantly evolving, and I actually had an insight a couple of hours ago on
Ah,
something that I would like to be doing as part of my meaningful mission.
yeah,
Just in thinking about this conversation that we were going to have, and what I often tell people in speaking engagements is I tell them, we're not what happens to us.
yeah,
We're who we decide to become.
mm,
And that's a wonderful message. But
yeah,
then another part of me spoke up and thought about the trauma that I went through. And it was at the hands, of some boys, which I'm sure
yeah,
we'll talk about here shortly.
yeah,
And I thought, I don't want to just accept that things happen to women in particular and they're
right,
just supposed to learn to live with it. Like, I want to prevent what happened to me from happening to other people.
Yeah.
And so that's something that just hit me a few hours ago. Okay,
Yeah.
how can I
Mm, yeah.
introduce the dialogue? How can I help educate people without preaching to them
Yeah.
about
Mm.
how we can create a world where people don't undergo malicious things that people do to them?
Right. That's a beautiful, it sounds like a beautiful mission. And you're right. It's not really, I love that sense of purpose for some reason, but it's not that we have one purpose. I
Right.
agree. And it keeps changing anyway. I love I mean, what's not to love about curiosity? Just being open, for what comes. And I know, I love the way you say that too in your book. You, clearly, that's a statement that we do not control our experiences. Things will happen to us,
Mhm.
but it's the way we choose to respond to them. And I know this is an old statement, is an old,
Mhm.
let's say, wisdom that so many people talk about, coaches and psychologists, but there's so much truth in it. How do we even begin to learn to embody this truth, Holly? How do we come to that understanding that's okay sometimes to go through painful experiences without blaming ourselves for it, because it has been my case for so many years, the shame and the blame and feeling guilty. So is that something that we can actually learn intellectually, or do we have to go through the experience in order to put that to test and see what happens?
Well, I certainly think it makes it more personal if we do go through it
Yes.
ourselves. I mean, that's why so often you see
Yeah.
people championing causes that they've gone through themselves.
Yes.
It does become part of their mission.
Do you actually think that's possible to learn in a different way? We don't have to go through these painful experiences in order to learn to deal with them, or to become wiser, or to be had to start living a meaningful life. How can we learn in different ways? Yeah, I ask this question often. I often get the same answer, unfortunately, that we have to go through some things, some suffering in order to learn. But from your perspective, do you see different ways to learn wisdom, to learn certain truth?
Oh, absolutely. Like I mentioned before, I love to hear other people's perspectives. And so some things I will never experience personally, but it's in listening to other people's experiences that I can have empathy for them. And for
Yeah,
instance, I
yeah.
will never know what it's like to be a Black woman. I couldn't
Mm,
possibly know what it's like to be a
mm,
Black woman,
yeah,
but I enjoy talking to Black women and
yeah,
people who are completely different from me
yeah,
to see how they experience the world. And
mm,
I think, wow, like,
yeah.
I don't want to be somebody who perpetrates that.
Right.
And so I think we
Uh,
can learn on an empathetic listening level, certainly. And I'm the
right.
type of person that thinks I want to, help change things, not because of the way it affects me. I
Yeah.
don't want it to affect anyone that way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Right. And you make me think a lot about children, how to teach them those skills, especially because it has been my experience not having them, not understanding any of this. Of course, what I know today, but I did understand at the level of intuition, there's something that was clearly not right. Violence, unkindness never resonated. Not right in the sense of righteousness, but there's something about fundamentally, let's say, um, out of balance when we don't empathize, as you said, when
Mhm.
we don't treat the other as we would treat ourselves. And that has been with me since I was very little, and it never left me. And maybe that's why I chose the spiritual path. So, yeah, you said something interesting. I mean, so many things. You say, uh, God, the universe, or whatever term one prefers to use, does not do bad things to people and does not punish people. People do bad things to people. That stopped me for a while because it really resonated true. Of course, what came to me from the teachings, all the understandings I have today, is ignorance. It's ignoring fundamental truth, such as the one that I just mentioned about there's interconnectedness of everything. how can you not see that? We have one reality. I mean, that's my spiritual perspective.
Yeah.
There's one ground reality that holds all this together. That's very clear to me. And I know that. So, yeah, talk to me about this idea of God and spirituality and unfair experiences.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that passage spoke to you
Mm.
because that was a huge epiphany that I had in the evolution of my own healing. So, I talk about in my book how, I grew up in the Catholic faith. I went to Catholic schools for a majority of my childhood, and the church and the school did a good job at some things, at other things they did not.
Yeah,
And there was this focus on sin that
yeah,
if something bad happens to us, it's because we did something to deserve it somehow.
right.
And the way they taught about sexuality in particular was that they were going off the assumption that everything is consensual. They were trying to control our behavior as teenagers to say, oh, well, don't engage in premarital sex, it's a sin.
Yeah,
And the way it'll affect you spiritually if you do that,
right.
never even considering the fact that people assault each other.
Mm,
And so,
yeah,
you know, boys sexually assaulted me when I was 13. And I make it a very, very strong point to say, not to say that I was sexually assaulted because it sounds passive and it sounds
yeah,
like something that just happens to people. It
right.
doesn't just happen. People
Mm,
actually do that to others. So
mm,
I really try to put the emphasis back on the perpetrators who did
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And when they first did that to me, those were the first thoughts that entered my head. I must have done something to deserve this,
right.
or God wouldn't let this happen to me. I must be a terrible person. I'm a sinner. So I took this huge burden on myself, thinking I was this bad, flawed person.
Right.
And I was so deeply ashamed that I didn't share it with anyone.
Yeah.
And even if I had at the time, and even if somebody had told me, Holly, this was not your fault, I don't think that thought would have changed for me instantly because I had been so entrenched in this teaching at my
Yeah.
school that had occurred for several years. So it wasn't until I went into therapy about 8 years ago and worked with a trauma specialist and a life coach where I began to change the narrative and see the truth for what it
Right.
was, that
Right.
I had no responsibility for it. It was not my fault. I
Right.
did nothing. I was in my own house.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't because of something I was wearing, I didn't taunt anybody. I was just minding my own business.
Right.
And so, you know, I finally got to a place where I realized it wasn't my fault. And then it really helped me challenge what I had been taught in the church.
Right.
And so often I hear this, even across all types of denominations in the Christian
Yeah.
religion,
Yeah.
is that, oh, if bad things happen to you, maybe you did do something to deserve it, or
Mm.
God was testing you. It kind of
Right.
harks
Right.
back to the book of Job.
Yeah.
And I
Huh.
thought, that's really effed up if God
Mm. Yeah.
does that.
Right.
And
Right. 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 Huh.
And it didn't really align with the truth that I felt that God or the universe was, that
Mm.
God goes around punishing people for fun to see what kind of metal you're made of.
Right. Right.
And so I was really challenging that assumption and marking the epiphany I had in the book that no, like God doesn't do bad things to people. People do
Mm.
bad things to people. In this case, these boys thought it was okay to do what they did. That
Right.
had nothing to do with God.
Right.
And
Right.
so I want people to know that.
Mm.
I still even talk to survivors nowadays, especially since I wrote the book, that say, well, I was drinking at the time. I said, all the more reason they shouldn't have done that because you were mentally incapacitated.
Right.
That's
Right.
not a reason to assault a woman.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
they said, well, I was in a place I shouldn't have been. Where were you? I was at a
Right.
party. I'm like, no, it
Right.
shouldn't happen to you at a party. That shouldn't happen to you anywhere.
Anywhere. Right.
It's
Right.
and and I think it's really mind blowing for a lot of people to hear that. Uh, like you didn't bring it on yourself.
Yeah.
God's not doing it to you. And
Right.
it really helped me find a place of peace that, okay, I can connect with spirituality to my own
Mm.
understanding. I prefer to
Mm.
use the word universe.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
I can know that
Yeah.
I didn't do anything to bring this on, and
Right.
that there is a universe out there that
Mm.
does love me and champions for me and would never let that happen to me.
Right. 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 So, how do you make sense of all the injustice that we see in this reality? Uh, I just mentioned before myself, ignorance would be my answer. But how do you make sense of that yourself?
It's very difficult because I think people start othering others.
Yeah.
They think, "Oh, well, you're not like me." They think of
Yeah.
some reason to dehumanize them.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
I think that's really the source of, all the social injustice
Mm.
in the world is
Mm.
not recognizing that everybody's equal.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly, I would, it's exactly that. That's the message, is the separation. There's
Mhm.
this idea that somehow we are all different, come from a different source, or somehow we deserve to suffer because of our skin color or our belief systems or whatever it is. It's really a sad reality, isn't it? It's really hard to rationalize that. I don't. I know that you just mentioned all the way that religion uh, of all over the world, they try to make sense of suffering. And a lot of times they talk about punishment, and some of them, even the traditions that I followed, Hindu, which is
Mhm.
Vedanta, is non-duality. They don't talk about karma as much, but I know in India they do. So that there's still this underlying kind of blame, trying to blame you for whatever happens to you. Oh, this is karma. You must have done something in different
Right.
lifetimes. So that really, it made sense. It made a lot of sense to me at some point in my life, and then I think I went too much. I went really like completely. I was so desperate for to find my own peace and happiness that I just embraced that idea, that I got myself in trouble because of it. And then I realized that was not. It took me a while to realize that was not. It didn't resonate with the heart, because what I knew as a child didn't resonate with that idea. Although it makes sense, a lot of scientists, that's what they go for, the laws of karma when it comes to understanding what's happening here. But I really have to say it's ignorance. It's not really getting to know your own self, your own heart, and that's why we do the things we do. So talk to me about the main intention of writing your book. I love the title. I can see for miles, and also the inspiration to title your book this way. I have an idea, of course, but talk to me about that and the main intention when you wrote at first, when you began to write the book.
Yes. First, would you like me to talk about the title and how I came up with that?
Yes, please. Yes,
Okay,
yes,
definitely. Well, as you can see, running is a motif throughout the book.
yes.
And so, running miles definitely plays into that theme.
Yeah.
And then there was a more figurative meaning to it as well, because in my darkest moments, I couldn't see ahead of me. Sometimes I couldn't see the next year or even the next day. I
Right.
didn't have a vision for my future. But then, in the high times, and then ultimately at the end of the book, I think I can say this without giving away the book,
Ah, yes.
was that I get to a place where I can see my future and I can see for miles. And there's also the motif of climbing mountains.
Yeah.
In part 5 of the book, I climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the
Yeah.
tallest
Amazing.
freestanding mountain in the world.
Amazing.
So there was that literal meaning, which
Yeah.
talks about running miles, and then also that figurative meaning, seeing my future.
Right. That's beautiful though. And intuitively that came to me when I saw the title. Ah, I love the title. It kind of
Thank
opens the
you.
heart. And I'm like, oh wow. Why? So another question I have with it's part of the opening questions actually. I went all the way back. But finding your own power. So that's the main topic, or let's say the message for this conversation. So I mean, for your work too, that's part of your work. And I love this idea of finding power. But then before we talk even about what, finding power, what is power? How do you define power these days, Holly?
Power to me is the freedom to choose.
Yeah.
And that's everything from choosing your mindset to choosing, excuse me, what actions you want to take, to choose how to reframe your narrative, how to claim your identity. And we don't always have infinite possibilities, right? I mean,
Yeah.
anytime we make decisions, there's always constraints.
Right.
But the key is to know that there's always something we can do. And,
Mm.
as I talk about in my book, and I think everybody experiences this, is that you have moments where you are either rendered powerless or you feel like you don't have any power.
Yes.
And true empowerment is taking back your power, and that includes your
Mm.
identity and your narrative.
Ah, yes, your identity. And this is when you speak of identity, what that, like in my case, my identity always goes to the spiritual realm.
Mhm.
It's not who, but what I am. So, how do you kind of guide somebody into finding their true identity from your perspective, of course?
Part of that is looking back to who we were as a child, because
Yes,
we weren't getting taught anything yet.
right.
We just were. And that was
Mm,
our most authentic self. So when I worked with
yeah,
my life coach a few years ago, that was one of the first things she had me do, is think, okay, who was Ho Ho? Who was
yeah,
that person?
yeah.
And
True.
for a long time, I held on to this narrative that, like, the assaults and then my dad passing away when I was young
Yeah,
completely ruined me. I thought, okay, well, what would Holly be like if these things hadn't occurred?
right.
And my life coach said to me, well, Holly, what was Ho Ho like? And I went into
Yeah,
that description that I talked about on the very first
yeah,
question of this conversation. Oh, Ho Ho was somebody, who, you know, loved people, loved to explore, uh, loved to be active, loved to make people laugh. And she asked, well, Holly, does that describe you now? And I said, yeah, actually it does. And she
right.
said, you're still you. That
Mm,
true essence is still there. Yes, horrific things have happened, but it didn't change who you are. And that was a huge epiphany for me, because I thought,
yeah.
okay, I've been clinging to this identity of a victim.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying that I wasn't a victim, right?
right.
Anybody who experiences abuse or trauma can rightfully say,
Yeah.
I'm a victim. But I think the difference is that if we're not careful sometimes, we can tie our identity to that event.
Mm,
And
yeah,
that's not what we're meant to do. We're meant to tap into our true essence,
that is
that
true.
what we've been talking about.
Yeah,
And so
true.
I decided right then and there, no, I am no longer going to tie my identity to those events. I'm going to, keep being Ho Ho. I'm going to keep being Holly. And every decision that I make from here on out, I'm going to make sure aligns with that person.
Yeah,
So I think that could be helpful to someone, is to think back to who they are at their core,
yeah,
not what they do,
right.
not what's happened to them, but who they are at their core, and think, okay, how can I become the truest version of myself?
Mm.
how can I reclaim that identity? And that is a huge part of taking your power back and finding your own power.
That is true. Yes, I agree. And would you say that that always takes doing the work that you did and I did as well, the healing work, or could we find this true identity without doing the work of therapy, doing any kind of healing work? Is that also possible?
I think it takes conscious effort. Whether
Yeah,
somebody accesses guides like a therapist or a life coach, even just working through a journal. Like
yeah,
one book that I'm reading right now
right.
that I absolutely love, and you might enjoy too, is The Greatness Mindset by Lewis Howes.
Oh,
And he has some great exercises to put yourself through to to really examine where your thoughts are coming from, uh, where your sense of identity comes from, and, and to think, okay, is this who I want to be? Does this align with who I really am? So, in answer to your question, I think it does require work.
yeah,
I think it's very helpful to get an outside perspective from a therapist
right.
or from a life coach, or I don't know, who else would, fill that gap,
Yeah.
working through a book somehow, because we get so entrenched in our own thoughts, and our thoughts
Yeah.
lie to us all the time.
Yes. So true. Yes. Yeah. That's good to get some perspective, get out of our own head and just kind
Yeah,
of see
exactly.
what happens. Yeah. My case has been spiritual understandings, going deeper into spirituality in the sense of finding fundamental truth. I really want to know what this is not really all about, but what is this? Like, what is to be? We just realize all of a sudden that we are here, kind of in this body, and everything's happening, but very few people really ask the question with that sincerity. Like, what is? How did I get here? How did this get here? Not even me, but this, the body mind complex.
Right.
And that's when by being very sincere about that search, I got into some deep let's say understandings that led to healing, but it's not the case for everyone. I love the idea of therapy, and I do talk to a lot of therapists, and meditation is a wonderful way to
Yes.
journaling. You said that that's
Mhm.
has been was one of my first steps too, just writing down everything and then kind of seeing what kind of thoughts I had. It's amazing how much we go through in life. And it surprised me that some of us don't really realize how much pain we living with. I have seen that with my family members that and friends that they are just they have this let's say deeply seated pain that they're not aware of. I mean,
Mhm.
that really surprises me that we can live with so much pain. And would you say that this is also one of the reasons why we see so much injustice and violence in this reality? Because so many of us are unaware of our own pain, let alone the pain of others.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people who are happy with themselves, people who aren't in pain don't hurt other people, and
Mm.
they're not mean to other
Yes.
people.
Yes. Yeah.
And yes, and especially, talking about othering people or blaming, other groups
Yeah.
for our ills. It's
Yeah.
because, we've experienced, and I'm just talking about general
Yeah.
we've experienced some deep-seated pain and some deep-seated trauma,
Yeah.
and rather than addressing it, it seems so much easier to blame this outside group or this outside person for
Right.
all of it
Right.
and to punish them for it.
God. So it's easier to blame than to go within. It's always easier to go to blame the outside world, the circumstances or whatever it is, what happened to me, than just going to find out the truth within our own selves, why these things happen. And
Mhm.
it's interesting, the more we like the conclusion I have, which is that ignorance is the main issue with the problems we have here. Ignorance of fundamental truth that everything is connected, that we are one in one reality, not one in mind and body, obviously, but one in reality, one reality. So that really, by ignoring that, we just create all these problems, and it just, the more we ignore, the more problems we create, and the less we can see with clarity. I noticed that too, and it really saddens me
Absolutely.
though. But in reality, when I go deeper to see the reason to do this, is because I can't help it really but do this. I couldn't do anything else really. So it's
Mhm.
not really that it's almost like there's no person here trying to do these things. It's just life itself supporting life supporting life. That's what it feels like. I don't know if you had that feeling before, but just sharing that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like you, I'm the type of person that likes to dig deep. Not
Yes,
everyone does.
right, right. Not everyone does, for sure. For sure.
But, like, I want to know, why I act the way I do, why I feel the
Yes.
way I do. I I try to make myself as whole as possible so I can be the
Yeah,
best human being possible for
right,
the world.
right.
It can feel frustrating sometimes because, you know, I want people to change their perspective,
Yeah,
but
yes.
ultimately, it's not, you know, forcing what we think on other people, it's
Yeah.
modeling the behavior.
Ah, yes. So that's funny that we try to change other people, but they're the only ones that can change themselves,
Right.
right? So they can be inspired by us, but we cannot really directly try to change them. That's really has been a guiding principle for me. Like, okay, it's being kind that I can see, I can receive kindness from others. So I really, and it's not something that is a belief system, because I'm very careful also with holding on to ideas, concepts, and then kind of being programmed for something. So I'm very open, but I don't know why, but this concept of kindness never left me, in a sense of being
Mhm.
true to myself. And if I have to be true with other people, I will be, but in a kind way. It's always that there's that guiding, it's a guiding principle. Okay, you can be true, and sometimes a lot of people don't want to hear the truth, but as long as you're kind, then it's not that it's fine for me as a person, but there's something about that resonates with the heart again. It's
Mhm.
interesting. So what is your message for people going through PTSD and depression at this time?
My suggestion is, to seek outside help for it because it's something that's so difficult to live with, if you don't. I had no clue until I went to therapy that I even had PTSD,
Right.
much less knew how to deal with it. And it was a life changer for me because when I went through episodes before, I just kind of fell into the whole experience. I felt like my thoughts, my feelings were out of control. My body was out of control.
Yeah.
My nervous system was. And just simple techniques have helped me so much. I mean,
Yeah.
even this morning, even before getting on this call, I had a couple things that I was feeling stressed out over. I mean, not PTSD,
Right.
but I thought, you know what? I need to meditate for about 15 minutes. And so I did. I turned on some nature sounds on YouTube
Yeah.
and meditated, and it helped bring my nervous system to a
Right.
more relaxed state.
Right.
And that's a major tool to use when you're experiencing an episode of PTSD is to calm that nervous system down.
Right.
And one technique I've been taught is grounding. Like ground yourself to
Mhm.
the present moment. Because a
Yes.
lot of times
Yeah.
when we experience PTSD, we're reliving that moment. Like our brain and body thinks that it's back in that moment. And it's, it's having the wherewithal to say, okay, I am here. It is
Huh.
July 17th, 2023. I'm sitting on my navy blue couch. I can feel the
Yeah.
ground beneath my feet.
Yeah.
I'm not there. I'm
Mhm.
safe.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that has helped me so well. And then of course sharing it with somebody,
Yes.
whether it is a therapist or sometimes I've called a friend. I'm like, hey, I'm I'm having a rough go right now.
Yeah.
And they'll talk to me, and them just talking to me about something every day, it can help bring me out of it. Go, okay, I'm not in that traumatic moment anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one. Meditation and being in the moment, grounding techniques. I love them. Being nature, I love that too.
Yes.
And you said that, I think it was in your book somewhere that I found or on your website, not sure, but you said PTSD is not just in one's head, it lives in the body if untreated. Yeah, that's true. Has been my experience too. Another thing you said that caught my attention in your book, you say, changing the subject a bit, or going back to the same subject about sexual abuse, you say sexual abuse does not just happen between adults and children, but between children, as in my case. I couldn't shake the feeling that the assault was somehow my fault. So the question here is, um, schools, because that's where we find that's where children go to and they interact with one another. So
Hmm.
not just schools. I know there are other places. I'm not a mother. I don't even know where children can be
Hmm.
found. In schools for sure comes to mind. So how can we change that, Holly, somehow? This because children can abuse children as well, right? In so many ways, bullies and all that. So
Yes.
what is your suggestion to prevent this from happening? Abuse children to children from happening?
I mean, I think education would go a long way
Yeah.
because, like you said, it's
Yeah.
ignorance, it's lack of awareness.
Yes.
And of course, as children, we aren't aware of why we do the things we do. I
Yes.
mean, I can't even tell you why the boys who assaulted me acted the way they did. I think I even wrote in the book, I hypothesized that they were exposed to pornography at home or something. They
Yeah.
learned it from somewhere.
Right.
They didn't
Right.
just come up with it.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
in the schools I went to, it wasn't discussed at all until
Yeah.
I was a senior in high school, and by then, you know, so many assaults had happened.
Yeah.
And I know one thing that really heartened me is that, I spoke to my cousin who is sending her children to the same Catholic school that I went to,
Yeah.
and she sent me some education that's occurring there, even with the young children who are in kindergarten or first grade, talking about boundaries,
Yeah.
talking about not touching people without permission, and if you do something that makes somebody uncomfortable, you know to honor their boundaries, age appropriate. Certainly they're not talking about sexual assault in first grade,
Right.
but it made me so happy to hear that. I'm like, okay, it's part of the dialogue now. I don't know if it is, once you go into some of the upper grades, but I think just talking about that in the schools,
Yeah.
that's not okay. It's not just talking about sex education in the framework of a bunch of hormonal teenagers.
Right.
It's about
Yeah.
respecting boundaries.
Mm.
So
Yes.
education would go a long way. And I live in a state, I live in Oklahoma, where comprehensive sex education is not the law. And especially when you talk about parochial schools, it has to get taught in alignment with the church.
Right.
But certainly teaching about consent and
Yeah.
boundaries is in alignment with the church.
Should be. Yeah.
so
Yeah. Good.
so I hope to see more of that going
Yeah.
forward.
Yes, yeah. That it surprised me again that this is not part of the educational system.
Mhm.
Boundaries, right? What is consensual touch or and what's not? So that's very important to teach children. It surprised me that it's not already there. It hasn't been there. It really surprised me. But that's great. That are you planning to do some talks in schools, Holly, about this topic?
I was just thinking about that this morning. I would really like to.
Yeah.
Of course, I would have to
Wonderful.
find my pathway into that.
Yes. Yeah. Please let me know. I would love to see that happening because that's what we need to see people like yourself going out there and doing those things on our own, creating our own path, as you said, beautifully said. I think I mentioned off record the website quote that you have that says, If I can read it. Yeah. If you can see your path laid out in front of you, step by step, you know it's not your path. Your own path you make with every step you take. That's why it's your path. That's Joseph Campbell. So I love
Mhm.
that quote because that says a lot. That we create our own path. We listen. We learn to listen to our own intuitions and trust them. It's to me, it's all about self trust too. We've got
Yes.
to be able to trust that inner voice that really knows the truth. That's very much in alignment with the ideas, religious ideas, of love, of connectivity, of unconditional love, really, of kindness. But somehow it gets distorted when it's passed on with so many rules, and has been my case too, being raised by religious parents in a
Mhm.
religious town in Brazil, and that really
Oh,
didn't
wow.
it didn't help me along the way. There's something else. We're almost at the end, Holly, but there's something else that caught my attention. Um, yeah, it's something they said here that I think we mentioned before. You said that earlier too, but you write in your book, ultimately, my traumas have whatever meaning and purpose I ascribe to them. I get to decide what to do with what happened. And this is something that you have been talking about here, but I love the way you write that too. It's very clear. And then something else is towards the end, there's a letter from your mother to you, page 239. Almost a year after my mother passed, I was going through her items and found the letter she had written me when I was 14 years old, mere month after the assault. So I would love for you to read that letter. Is that possible? Do you have the book in front of you?
Yes. Yes, I do, and here
Yes.
is the book I can see for mine.
Yes, yes, right. But if there's any other passage that you'd like to read instead of this one, please do so.
Okay, here is the letter that she wrote.
Yes.
And I'm giving away my age here by putting my reading glasses
Yeah.
on.
Tell me about it.
It says, "Dear Holly, this letter is to tell you how much I love you. When you were born, I thought you were the most beautiful baby girl, and you were.
Yeah.
You've grown up now, and you're still beautiful and a wonderful person. I couldn't ask for a better daughter. I'm so proud of the kind of person you are. I hope you'll always come to me if you ever need anything or ever have a problem you need help with. I love you because you're you,
Mm.
Mom."
Wow. Yeah, that's emotional though. It was emotional for me. It is
Mhm.
now. Yeah, that's so true. It's almost like she could have been um I mean a monk, a spiritual teacher saying that to somebody. How wonderful. So
Mhm.
I want to thank you again for your beautiful presence in this reality,
Oh, thank you so much.
and being open to healing, to life, to
Mhm.
yourself. It's just the most beautiful thing I can think of. Thank you so much again, Holly.
Oh, and thank you, Valeria. Thank you for, providing this platform to, provide that healing and the positive messages to the world.
Oh my God, this is my fun place. Sacred but fun. Meaningful fun, I call it. You have no idea how much fun I have with these things. If I could, I would be like moving and bouncing around here.
Oh, I imagine. I imagine. It's so neat to see so many people, you know, working to make the world better and to make
Yes.
themselves better.
Yes, right. That really says everything to me. Like, oh my God, that's it. That's the sign. That's the revelation, the real one. So we almost at the end. I do have a technical question for you, but before that technical question, I have a question that I usually ask everyone. What are three experiences you wish everyone to have before they lose the body, before they die?
Oh, I wish for everyone to go someplace they've never been once a year. Now, it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be off in one of the four corners of the globe like I do.
Yes.
Just go someplace they've never
Uh-huh.
been to have a different experience. And part of that, this could align with it, experience a completely different culture from your
Yes.
own.
Yes.
Most of the world is not like the United States.
Right.
And
Uh,
it's been so eye-opening for me to go to other countries and to see the way the rest of the world operates, the way they think.
yeah.
I mean, it really makes the world so much broader, and I feel like it's made me a more empathetic person.
Mm,
I mean, we tend to judge as
yes.
humans people we don't know or the way they're portrayed on TV or media, and
True.
when we experience it firsthand, it's completely different. One thing I always
Yeah.
tell people when they talk about the Chinese government, for instance,
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
the Chinese people are lovely people.
Mm.
I, I loved meeting them.
Huh. Yeah.
Yeah, I would encourage people to do that. Immerse yourself in a different culture.
Yeah.
And the third thing is always try something that challenges you a little
Mm.
bit, even
Yeah.
if it's scary,
Yeah.
because the way you'll feel about yourself afterwards is, you know, amazing, and it's wholeness, and it'll encourage you to go even further. And it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be an accomplishment necessarily, but just do things that make you uncomfortable
Yeah.
every once in a while.
Yes. Yeah. That's a beautiful message because we can easily get, let's say, to believe that life is what's happening around us only. And it's so easy to be programmed in a sense. But it's important, like you said, I love the message of exposing the mind to different colors of life, aspects of life, flavors, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful to me. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom here too. To me, timeless wisdom, as I usually say,
Oh,
because
what
that's what it sounds like to me.
wow.
And before we say goodbye, where's the best place to find more information about you, Holly?
Best place would be my website,
Yeah.
holliestewart.com. You can also go on to Facebook, where I have a page called Hollie Stewart, author and speaker. And I post on there almost every day.
Yes.
You are welcome to find me on either one of those spaces.
Wonderful. I'll have those links on the video profile, interview profile.
Mhm.
Thank you so much again for your presence,
Oh,
Holly.
thank you
We'll
so
talk
much,
soon.
Valeria.
Bye for
I've
now, my dear.
so enjoyed this
Oh,
conversation.
me too. Me too. Thank you. Bye for now.
Oh, thank you, Valeria.
Thank you, Holly.